I'm Bradley Verdell. You're watching Authors Recommend Books. With me today is poet and author Mark Will. He is the author of Letters and a Man, which you can get on Amazon. All right, before we get started, I just want to remind everybody we do not make any money from recommending these books. Authors cannot contact us and say, hey, review my book, this channel is not monetized. We're not making any money from doing this. These are just books that we've read and we like. Okay, I'm going to get right to it. I'm going to recommend a nonfiction book today, and then Mark is going to recommend a fiction book. The book that I read, which I don't have a physical copy of because I read it on Kindle, is called Get Real, Get Gone. And the authors, are Rick Page and Jasna Tuta. And this is a fantastic book about sailing and living on a small yacht, sailing yacht, basically, or a small sailboat, I should say. It has 257 Amazon reviews with a 4.8 star rating, so that's pretty good. Came out in 2015, and full disclaimer, I actually have been in contact with the authors of this book, but I didn't know them before I read the book. I had a scene coming up in my Chadwick Yates series where the characters were going to be on a small sailboat crossing the ocean. So I got this book to learn about living on a sailboat, and I had some questions, so I contacted the authors of the book, and it's really cool. They live on a 36-foot cutter, and they travel around the world. They're completely sustainable. They actually make money every month. They don't pay rent or electricity or anything like that. I was able to contact them, I believe, when they were in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. They have a little Packard modem or something, and they can actually get emails to this thing. I asked them a few questions, and it ended up helping me edit a scene to make it really authentic. But what I love about this book is that it's basically, if you are not interested in the nuts and bolts of sailing, and I'm not planning to go live on a sailboat, but it's so philosophically relevant because it's called Get Real, Get Gone, and the first 48% of the book on Kindle is basically about just getting your brain in the right shape to live this kind of life, okay? And it's a philosophical treatise that you can apply to your life on land or anywhere. And one quote that really sticks out to me is the authors say, it costs a milliamp of electricity to change a thought in your brain. But if you want to fly your favorite peanut butter out to Tahiti, that costs a fortune. And really what they're getting at is that the key to living this life of your dreams, if you want to live on a sailboat and travel all around the world, is to get your mind into the right shape and have the right attitude.
And how do they recommend that one do that?
Yeah, basically, they give a lot of practical advice about the boat. And I think some of the facts in this book are so shocking. I'll give you an example. In the early part of the book, they show a mega yacht that belongs to the world's richest man. And their 36-foot sailboat is right in front of it. And they give this little piece of information. That mega yacht, that most people think that's what living on the sea is like. You have this mega yacht or whatever.
Right.
It costs 1,000 liters of fuel per hour. That boat burns 1,000 liters of fuel per hour. The authors of this book use 150 liters a year.
Wow.
Yeah, it's incredible. And they mention that, the problem is basically you have to plug your ears to all the marketing. Because the people who are reading, yacht magazines and stuff, they have this vision of life at sea that's completely unrealistic. And I love to read like historical books about sailing and sailors back in the 18th century and the 19th century. And they make the point that the ocean is still Ocean 1.0. Windows might be Windows 10, but this basically hasn't changed. And there's an ideal size for everything in nature. Another interesting fact was a 25-foot sailboat versus a 50-foot sailboat. One is twice as big as the other, but the 50-foot sailboat might cost 15 to 20 times more in cost because you need bigger sails, you need stronger rigging, you're going to pay more at marinas. Everything costs more. The cost just gets exponentially out of control. So one of the things they say is, look, the boat of your dreams has to be the right boat. And one thing they say is you cannot fall in lust with the wrong boat and then justify it to yourself. So they say, forget about these racing yachts with their fin keels. They're not safe or seaworthy. You need a good, seaworthy, solid boat that is the right boat for you. And if you can fall in love with that, if you can get your mind in the right shape, and if you can fall in love with the boat that's going to work and allow you to live on the sea, then you'll be good to go. It's a really phenomenal view of the world, and basically they say, look, if you're serious about this, you can spend maybe $10,000 to buy a boat, you can fix it up for $5,000, and you can be off. Or you can waste all your money on the wrong boat, have incredible maintenance fees. But basically one of the things they did is they sold their house. They bought a boat.
Who's they? Can you explain who the authors are?
Yeah, the two authors, Rick Page and Jasna Tuta. I don't really know a lot about them.
They're a couple.
They are a couple,
Okay.
yes, and they mention many other couples. The what they call the sea gypsy life is basically couples who buy a boat and they live forever, basically out on the sea. Yeah, because they're not paying for rent or a house or taxes or anything like that.
Right.
They
what is their citizenship?
I believe I don't want to say because I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure, but I do know that one of the cost estimates that they gave was in euros. So, for example, they say, look, if you say you sell your house, you're in your 40s, you're in your 50s, you sell your house, you've got 200,000 euros.
Yeah.
After you buy a boat for, say, 30,000 euros, a nicer boat than the bare minimum, right? You buy this boat, you fix it up, you immediately move on board. Then you learn everything you need to know about how to sail. You move onto the boat. As you're fixing it up, you get to the point where you learn anchoring, you learn to take it on little trips in safe waters, you get to know other people, you help out on other boats, you learn what you're doing, and you go from there. But if you have 200,000 euros, say, after you buy the boat, you invest that. If you get 6.6% back, that's over 13,000 euros a year. That's plenty to live on if you're living on a boat. They say your main cost is going to be food and boat maintenance. Another line that I love in this book is when they say, look, only an unrefined hippie thinks the wind is free. I say take the maintenance cost of your boat divided by how many miles you've gone. That's the cost of the wind. So if you spend $10,000 on boat maintenance over 5 years, you go 5,000 miles, the wind costs $2 a mile. And you've got to keep those maintenance costs down. And they give you good advice like, look, don't buy fancy electronic winches and gadgets that are going to break and you don't know how to fix them. Buy good, solid equipment. They say don't buy anything. Well, they don't say don't buy anything, but I like the realism of the book when they say, look, don't buy made in China stuff. You buy something that costs twice as much but will last 5 or 6 times as long. Buy good, but don't buy electronic gizmos. You don't need a refrigerator. You don't need that kind of stuff. I mean, I think a great example is imagine somebody on this mega yacht that has no sails. They're burning 1,000 liters of fuel an hour. When they want to finish their clothes, they dry their clothes in a fancy, marine dryer. He says when you put marine in front of anything, refrigerator or canvas or furniture, the price goes astronomically high. But the idea of having a dryer on a boat is so ridiculous when you consider it's a sailboat.
Right.
There are laundry lines everywhere on this boat. I mean, me personally, we both live in Taiwan. I haven't had a dryer in 6 years.
No.
And it's fine. You don't need it. So they're saying, get your mind in the right shape. You can achieve your dreams. I'll just finish off by giving a quote from this book that I really love. It's from Sterling Hayden. and they quote him in this book, and he says, "What does a man need, really need? A few pounds of food each day, heat and shelter, 6 feet to lie down in, and some form of working activity that will yield a sense of accomplishment. That's all, in the material sense, and we know it. But we are brainwashed by our economic system until we end up in a tomb beneath a pyramid of time payments, mortgages, prosperous gadgetry, playthings that divert our attention from the sheer idiocy of the charade. The years thunder by, the dreams of youth grow dim where they lie caked in dust on the shelves of patience. Before we know it, the tomb is sealed." And I think that's fantastic. I mean, there are people who backpack around the world on a shoestring budget. These people
Sure.
are living, they're probably making money from their book on Amazon. They're actually making money every month by keeping their expenses low and living below their means. And they're free. They can go wherever they want.
Right.
But one thing they do say is they're not in a race to visit everywhere in the world. They say, look, it's about smiles on deck, not miles under the keel. They say, give up trying to prove something to people. They say, look, if your boat is down for maintenance, you don't say, no, I'm going to press on. I can't handle it. I got a schedule to keep. I mean, they're basically permanently retired at sea. They can say, look, we're going to stay here. We're going to learn the local language. We're going to make some local friends, eat the local food. They say, if you've got 2 equally good options, get your head in the right shape. Choose what's actually going on in your life. I love that. They say, I'll just finish with this. They say, the ocean doesn't care about your goals. You adapt to the ocean. The ocean is not going to get out of your way. This idea of the man on the yacht who challenges the sea and goes through the storm, that's for idiots, So it's a fantastic book. I recommend it to everybody. It's full of fantastic practical tips. I mean, everything from 12-volt electrical systems to, but the main point is the life philosophy behind it. So, Get Real, Get Gone by Rick Page and Jasna Tuta. And I hope I haven't pronounced their names wrong.
Just a couple of questions. How long have they been out at sea?
I'm not sure. I know they're on their 2nd or 3rd boat. They've made some slight adjustments. And I believe, I may be getting this wrong, but I believe Rick was 40 or 45 when he got, but they mention other couples who start out much younger. In fact, one couple they recommend, they live on a boat with basically no electronics. They use oil lamps. They don't have a motor for coming in to like a marina or something. They scull the boat the old-fashioned way. They don't even have a transmitting radio. So for the steampunk guy like me, that's fantastic. I mean, a true 19th century style experience is fantastic. And people got started with a lot less money than they did. But it seems like Rick retired and Jasna retired, and they started out a little bit older.
And how often do they dock? I mean, how often do they stop somewhere?
Yeah, they mentioned that they like to, when they find a place they like, they just stay there. They're not constantly on the move.
Right.
So it seems like they do quite a bit. They go to a place, they like it. They're not in a hurry to rack up the miles, so to speak.
Did they mention their favorite places?
They seem to really like Mexico, actually.
Okay.
And they mentioned La Paz, which is interesting because we both read The Pearl by John Steinbeck.
Right.
And La Paz, of course, is mentioned in there. And they say, it's, that you'll be amazed how friendly most of the people in the world are. And also, one other caution they give about marine specialists, there's a guy in La Paz apparently who's a marine refrigeration mechanic, and he charges $100 an hour. And they said, meanwhile, you can see a doctor for $4 for a 30-minute session. $4 US for a doctor's visit, and this guy's charging $100. So it made me think, wow, I should go to trade school, get good at marine refrigeration, and then serve all these rich people on yachts, live on my own, but travel around the world. I'd always be able to make money. with the spec, because they say, these boat things, they break down all the time.
But they've learned to do their own repairs.
Yeah, and they don't rely on their engines.
Yeah.
And some people who sail, they have like a small outboard engine that costs, $1,200. The biggest maintenance bill they'll ever have is $1,200 to buy a new one. But if you have some fancy diesel engine that's built into your boat, you may be paying
10 times that.
10 times that. And the bigger the boat gets, the cost doesn't double. It's exponential. It's out of this world.
Right.
These mega yachts. So.
Okay.
Fantastic book.
5 stars?
5 stars from Bradley Verdell, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. What do you got for us?
Well, today I'll talk about Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. I guess that's how his name is pronounced. I wasn't sure. I don't know much about Gaiman or Gaiman or Gayman. I don't know. I don't know much about him other than he's the one who said George R.R. Martin is not your bitch. Remember when people were complaining about George R.R. Martin not having finished Game of Thrones?
That's right.
That's all I knew him for. I'd never read any of his other works, American Gods or Anansi Boys or any of these. I knew nothing about him. So recently I was in the S-Light bookstore here in Taipei in the Gongguan area, and I saw this fantastic cover with Thor's hammer on it, and the book seemed to be glowing. And when I saw it, it's like there's no way I'm not getting that. I'm taking that home with me. So yeah, I purchased this paperback and I tore through it in 2 or 3 days.
Wow. How many pages is it?
Very compelling.
I know you're a fast reader, but still, that's impressive.
265. It's
okay.
Yeah. I mean it looks big. It's the size is big, but the print is also big, and the narratives are just very reader friendly, very compelling, and so you don't want to stop. So for me, this is also a 5-star book, and I would call it canonical, and by that I mean it's a book that I would put in my own personal canon, and I think it's a great source book and compendium. Like if you want to know about Norse mythology, this is a very concise and also complete source book. Like everything you need to know from creation to Ragnarok, which is like the Norse mythological apocalypse, is in here. And so he's organized it very logically and chronologically. So what he did apparently is he went back to the original sources, which I believe are Icelandic, the prose Edda and the poetic Edda. So he read those, and he had some other sources that he consulted, like previous anthologies, basically, and then he chose the tales that he found the most compelling and the most interesting to him, and then he retold them. And his style is humorous and engaging, and you won't want to put this down. He focuses on 3 of the Norse gods: Odin, Thor, and Loki. So Odin is the king of the gods, I guess you could say. Thor is a god of thunder, and this is his hammer. And then Loki is a trickster god who both creates problems for the other Norse gods and helps them solve their problems. So he's an ambiguous character. I won't give the specifics about what he does, but he's a very interesting trickster god. But then some of the other minor gods, I didn't know much about them, but I learned many interesting things about them from this book. Balder, for instance, Frigg, who's the queen of the gods, and Freya, and then there are a lot of giants that I didn't know about. This book clarified, my knowledge about the Norse tradition, the Norse cultural matrix, which is important to me as I'm working on my epic, because each installment highlights a different cultural matrix. Like in Of Letters and a Man A, the Phoenician cultural matrix was key, and in B, it'll be the Chinese cultural matrix, and I don't know what letter, the Norse cultural matrix will be featured in, but whatever letter it is, this book will be one of my primary source books. What else do I want to say? I didn't know about the two different races of Norse gods. There's the Vanir and the Aesir. So it's kind of like in Greek mythology. You have the Olympians and the Titans, and they sort of they're like different generations of gods. I think something similar happened with Norse mythology, and same thing in Hindu mythology. You've got the Devas and I think they're the Asuras, or anyway, different races of gods with different functions. But the Vanir and the Aesir have some kind of cosmic battle or war, and then after that they sort of like joined forces and intermarried, and so some of the Vanir live with the Aesir, and I didn't know about that, so that's quite interesting.
Yeah, I didn't know about that either.
Yeah. Well, and this, Norse mythology is still with us today. Gaiman talks about how his original interest in Norse mythology began with comic books, like reading about Thor and Loki and Odin. That was his first exposure to these characters, is through American comic books. And then, he started reading the original sources, and it's become like a lifelong interest for him.
I gotta just say, it's so interesting how, very successful, like the media industry, they often draw on these, ancient legends and myths and things like that, and then they take from that source and give us something to pop culture, and then people who find that part of pop culture interesting trace it back to the source. I mean, I grew up on Indiana Jones, and then when I realized Indiana Jones was partially based on Alan Quatermain, I go back and read Alan Quatermain, and my mind is blown. So.
Yeah, and the author of Alan Quatermain is
H. Rider Haggard.
One of your primary influences.
One of my primary,
if I'm not mistaken.
Writing influences. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I mean and that's basically the path that he followed. The original interest as a kid was American comic books, and then he went back to the source, and now he's produced this wonderful volume. I'm out of frame. Yeah, and then also for me the Thor's hammer always reminds me of Led Zeppelin's Hammer of the Gods. So that's an interesting connection. And then also, the names of these gods are still with us in the days of the week. Certain days of the week, like from Tuesday through Friday. Tuesday is named after one of the minor gods. He features in here, but he's not an important character. I didn't know this. I think he's a one-handed god. He gets one of his hands. Well, I won't give it away. But anyway, he's the one-handed god, and then so our word Tuesday is derived from this god, and then Wednesday is Woden's Day or Odin's Day.
I've heard that.
Yeah, and then in the German, Richard Wagner, the German opera composer, his ring cycle is based on the same series of myths, So you got Woden, Odin, Wotan, as he's called in German. That's Wednesday. And then Thursday is simply Thor's Day.
Right.
Right? So So he's the god of thunder, and every Thursday, whether we realize it or not, we're paying homage to him. And then Friday is Frigg Day. That's the origin, and Frigg, as I mentioned before, is the queen of the gods. So there are many. I always enjoy tracing the origins of cultural artifacts or ideas that are still with us today. I'll just close by reiterating that this is a 5-star book, great source book, great compendium. If you're at all interested in mythology, Norse mythology in particular, I think this is the ultimate source book. Very accessible, very engaging, and I'd never read any Neil Gaiman before, but I'm considering reading American Gods and/or Anansi Boys or any of his other works.
Yeah, he's really taken off. But a couple of quick questions for you.
Yeah.
So how is it organized? I assume it's like a series of short stories, basically.
Yeah.
Basically.
I mean, he just chose the tales that he found most relevant, and then he organized them chronologically.
Okay.
So it begins with the creation of the world, and Yggdrasil, the primeval tree.
The tree.
Yeah, from which later Odin hangs himself. He sacrifices himself to himself, which is fascinating. He's almost Christ-like, but
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So he's like a predecessor of Christian mythology. And then right on through Ragnarok, the end of the world. And, it's fascinating because at the end, the last thing he says, I think he dedicated this to his son, but the last phrase is, and the game begins anew. So it's understood that it's cyclical, it starts over. It's not completely linear. It's not like beginning to end times, and then there's nothing. No, from nothing, something else will come, and the cycle will begin again, presumably for eternity. Like the cycle is always renewed, and the drama, the adventure, the game starts again.
That's so interesting, because that strikes me as like some of these stories, they're so I'm teaching high school literature, and right now we're studying medieval romance, and there's these archetypes, like the hero, you mentioned Loki being the trickster.
Oh yeah.
These archetypes come up, and it's almost like these truths that are in this, they sort of cyclically play out in people's lives, across time and across culture. These sort of, it kind of gets to human nature. I feel like that's what I'm getting from. But your background, I think you should tell everybody your background, because Mark knows a lot about ancient literature. So just briefly.
Well, I have a background in classics, classical languages and literature. I've studied Greek and Latin, and the cultures and the histories associated with those languages.
Right, so compared to other sort of like ancient literature and ancient cultures that you said, like what strikes you as curious or different about Norse mythology?
Well, like with every...
You know a lot about Egyptology as well, a lot about Egyptian myths and things like that, so I can imagine it's quite different.
Yeah, I mean, when I study these mythological systems, these cultural matrices, I'm always fascinated by the universals, and then the things that make each system unique. So that you're asking primarily about what makes it unique, but I think it's important to emphasize the universals too. Like every tradition has some kind of trickster, but in some traditions the trickster is more important than in others. Like some of the Native American traditions. With the coyote figure, they emphasize the trickster. But I would say that in the Norse system, the trickster has a central role. Like Loki is a very important character. Not only he causes many problems for the other gods, but then, as I say, he also helps them solve many of their problems. But then ultimately, at the end, and I don't want to give away what happens, but his role in the destruction of everything is very significant. I mean, he's pretty much the cause of it. So your feeling towards him at the end is like he's clever and fascinating in many ways, but he's also evil. I mean, he's really and in fact, I think it's his daughter. There's a character named Hel, Hel.
Okay.
And I think, I'm not sure about the etymology, but it's probably related to our English word Hell, because she basically she rules over the dead. And she's a unique character in that she's like split in half. Half of her body is like a corpse, and then half is like the most beautiful woman on earth.
That's interesting.
So yeah, that's certainly a unique thing that I don't remember encountering in other mythological traditions. And Odin is a fascinating character. He's a war god, but at the same time he's a god of wisdom, and important for me, he's a god of writing. Like he's the one who created the runes. He's the one who invented the runes. I believe that occurred when he was hanging upside down on Yggdrasil, the axis mundi, like the center of the world, the ash tree in the middle of the world. He sacrificed himself to himself. It was a kind of meditation, and then that's when he had the inspiration for runes. And so he taught
language.
Yeah, he taught, he's a god of writing as well as a war god and a god of wisdom. And, he's blind in one eye, so he's a very mysterious character. And he's a shapeshifter. He can, change shape at will and appear as anyone.
It's very Zeus-like.
Yes, yeah. Well, he would be the equivalent to Zeus.
Doesn't the tree of Yggdrasil have a snake, a serpent, going around it, or am I thinking of something else?
There's I don't think it's around the tree. I think it's around like the ocean of the world. Yeah,
that's right.
But there's an important. I don't want to give that away. But there is a serpent like encircling the world, and I don't know what the gender of the snake is. I assume it's a he, but
we'll go with he.
Yeah. Okay. He plays an important role at the end of the world too. I wanted to say one other thing. Like, so when Odin's Day is Wednesday, right? And in other traditions, Wednesday is associated with Mercury. So if there is some kind of connection there, I mean, I think there is, because Odin has some qualities that are similar to those of Mercury. I guess the shape shifting aspect would be one. Like he's fluid, like Mercury itself. Like he can assume any form. He can take whatever shape he wants. So yeah, a very enjoyable read, a very important source book. So again, 5 stars for you, Mr. Gaiman.
And so anyone who, I guess, loves the Marvel universe and the Thor movies, they should read this, right?
Or anyone interested in mythology or, Scandinavia or Germany. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, that's it for our reviews. Before we go, very quickly, if you want to read my book, well, books. I have the Chadwick Yates series, and I'm working on other stuff, or Mark's book. We will put the links in the description, as well as, I'll put the links to the books that we recommend. So everything will be in the description. And again, I'm not using Amazon affiliate, so if you click and buy it, I don't get any money from that either. All these books, so how's that? Just a reminder, this is the first episode. I'm going to plan to do one a week, but please help us out by liking and subscribing and share to all your friends and all your enemies.